entertainment, current events, and Hollywood. Don't miss Creator to Creators, hosted by the filmmaker Meosha, known for the Shudder hit documentary Horror Noir and the acclaimed film Anatomy of an Anti-Hero, Redemption. This show features interviews with filmmakers and creatives from around the globe. Join the fun with guest celebrities and gain valuable insights. Subscribe now and follow Creator to Creators.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Creators to Creators today. Today we have a special guest.
Christopher Batty.
What a name. Your name is so cool. It's like
Is it?
like
Nice.
so fun. I love it. It's like
Yeah.
it commands respect. It's like, who's that guy? I want to know who that guy is.
Well, thanks for that.
Sure. So I love going back to the beginning. I always say the beginning kind of charts our trajectory in life, like our little habits that we pick up along the way, like when we're kids, kind of follow us into our adulthood. So I like to start, and what was your childhood like? What was that like growing up? And how did you find your way into doing the things that you're doing now?
I grew up, I was probably kind of more, I don't know if you want to say typical, but more idealistic. I grew up in Macon, Georgia, so small city in the South.
Yeah.
Kind of suburban kid. My parents, like my mom works in some of the time. And so, and I have a brother that's like 6.5 years older. So we didn't really hang out that much. So I kind of found myself alone a lot, I think. And so I think that's when I first sort of got and discovered like TV and movies, and I remember, even as a kid, the TV was always on for me. And it's not like I just sat there staring at the screen, but it was always sort of in the background. And so, just sort of becoming familiar with, things like the Brady Bunch or the Flintstones or what have you. And so that was kind of always there and fascinated me. Like how those things were made. And then, in 1977, I was 5 years old. So that kind of dates me a little bit. That's when Star Wars came out. And, my parents took me to see that. And that kind of hooked me. I was like, what is this? Like who would think of this? Like, what is going on? Because all the other movies coming out in the 70s were kind of serious and depressing and not for kids. And then all of a sudden this thing full of joy and hope and wonder came out. Because even someone like Spielberg at the time was making Jaws, which is not great for a 5-year-old.
Right.
I remember just never going in the water at that time and not even having seen the movie. Like I was too young to even see the movie, but I knew about the movie and I was like, I'm not going in the beach. But anyways, so just seeing Star Wars for the first time, I think that's what kind of hooked me. I got fascinated immediately, and ever since then, just trying to figure out, how that was made, and then, kind of went through school, and at the time, I couldn't figure out how to. Like, I didn't know what the path was to get to Hollywood. Right. And I kind of assumed that, it was just people in California and their parents had made movies and, it was kind of a closed system. And so I ended up going into architecture for college. And, I went through 6 years of that, got a professional degree. But it was always in my mind, like, I want to make movies, and I was just trying to kind of figure out my way with still trying to be the responsible kid and get like a professional degree and do something, reasonable. And, but, after I graduated, I worked at a firm for, I don't know, a few months, and I hated it. And so, it just wasn't for me. I didn't have the passion for it. It's a lot of work. it's a wonderful education, and the profession is a wonderful profession, but it's very challenging, and the amount of effort and work to do something meaningful in architecture, it just wasn't for me. And so I remember I was working for a firm, and he was trying to renovate a brand new office, but then he lost the lease on the old office. So we couldn't move into the new office yet because it wasn't done. So we ended up working out of his carport, not even a garage. It was a carport. And so we were there, and it was like dusty with concrete dust. And, he wasn't able to pay his bills, and they turned the water off in his house. And then there was the day that my paycheck bounced. And I was like, no, this is the universe telling me
You're like, I'm
this
not.
is not it. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is not it. And so it's weird because that very day I went home. I had an answering machine at the time. Again, still dates me.
Great. You
And
look great. So
thanks. But I had a friend that had moved to New York, and he left this message. He was like, I know this guy. He's doing animation for architects in New York. You should meet him and come out. So I did that
amazing.
immediately, just started packing my stuff up, and I was like, this is it. This is what's happening. And so I moved to New York, and I started with a small company doing visualization animations for architects. And then I slid over and started doing animations for TV and commercials, and we did like the MTV News logo and the
Nice.
MTV Cribs
I love
title
that show.
sequence. So that was a lot of fun. And then we slid over. I was doing like AT&T commercials, and then finally, I moved out to Los Angeles and started working for a small previs company called Pixel Liberation Front with Colin Green and Ken
Nice.
Secchi. And yeah, and then I started doing movies from there, doing previs on movies.
That's incredible. Isn't it amazing how I don't know if it's it
Mhm.
would what you call that, but like how destiny somehow still aligns you up to where like your purpose of where you need to be, even in spite of the decisions that we make. It's like you wind up where you need to be somehow. It's kind of crazy, like the phone call. Like it's like, wow.
Yeah, it was, I mean, I don't know, I'm not like that superstitious or anything, but it's definitely very strange. That was kind of just meant to be, right? That day you quit, just the
Yeah.
opportunity just kind of presents itself, and you're like, and it just have to be open to that stuff and take it,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, when it's available.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, like, like that, I'm sure that was a huge change. And I love that optimism of like, yeah, I'm just gonna go to New York and that just like that leap of faith that you took, and knowing like that, there's something more out there for yourself. Like what was the biggest challenge that you faced, transitioning from, architecture to animation and like how did you leverage that previous experience into the new
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So there's a lot of, like in the architectural education and skill set, there's a lot of similarities to filmmaking.
Mhm.
And because if you think about it, an architect is almost like a director in a way, right? Where
Right.
the architect has to kind of take into account all these different disciplines in order to create one object, one space. And sort of filmmaking is that same way. When you're having to manage all these different disciplines to create one kind of vision. So that kind of orchestration, you were able to kind of slide over, and not that I'm a director or anything, but still just sort of being aware of all those disciplines and
Yeah.
and how they can kind of fit together and come together to kind of create a whole entity. And so then it was just really about, you know, it's kind of like baby stepping it across because, I was doing architectural visualization. So you're still 3D modeling, still sort of camera work and kind of figuring out how to present this space in a way, through shots. Um, and how to sort of get its best foot forward in order to kind of sell it, right, to what investors or whoever it is that your audience is for the architectural thing. And then then you just sort of started going into movies, and you kind of know what you need to do, and then you just have to learn the very specifics of the language, and so once you start getting into shot making, as you have to learn the different languages, and the reasons why, and like what the purposes are. So it took, I did like 12 years in previs.
Wow.
And no, actually it was much more than that. It was like 16, 17.
Wow.
And but so you start kind of at the bottom, you're just an artist kind of learning, and you just sort of pay attention, right, to everyone around you, and just kind of learn as you go. And so what's nice is when you're young and in a small company, they kind of look out for you, but also it's okay to be kind of sit in the background and mess up, because you're going to make mistakes, and they can hide them, and then gradually you kind of go out there and kind of stick your neck out and make it
Right.
work.
You're like more confident. You're like,
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. I'm curious, like you said, it's kind of like, in a way, like directing. Have you thought about like transitioning and maybe getting into directing one day?
Yeah, I kind of like tossed it around, and first, with somebody like, like having the like imposter syndrome, where you're always kind of afraid to kind of put yourself out there. But I have, and I don't know, I think it's something that I might need to start trying sooner rather than later. It's hard, right? Well, I know you kind of come from an indie background, so you just kind of like do it, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I'm kind of in this the big Hollywood system, and so no one's just going to give you $100 million, to do a thing. So I think I need to figure out a way to kind of like step back and then do something for myself and more scrappy, right? And then kind of learn all over again from that point. Because you get kind of spoiled when you work on things like Superman or Iron Man, and then the Transformers one, where it's a big movie, and
Yeah.
so
Huge.
it's very fun and freeing in sort of ways, but like I don't think I'm ready to to direct the next whatever Marvel movie or whatever.
Marvel, I
you
believe in you.
know
I think you could do it. I
Thanks.
motivate
you
you.
know so maybe I need to again like take a step back, something smaller.
Like a short film
It's,
or something.
yeah, like a short, exactly, and safer, that because you're gonna, first thing you do is probably going to be bad, right? And then you don't want anybody to see it. So but yeah, just sort of start from the beginning again in that way.
I love that. No, it's funny because it's I have this joke. I worked with Eric Roberts on actually a few mini projects, and
Mm-hmm.
he just keeps working. This guy has over like 1,000 something credits. I'm like, how does he work so? So he's like in every movie, and he's like just enjoying himself at this point. I don't think he actually even takes anything seriously anymore.
Mm-hmm.
He's just having fun. So yeah, it's like I saw him on a little smaller project, and I was like, what are you doing here? And he's like, it's just like, yeah, I don't know. So yeah, I mean, I think shorts can turn into features, so
Mm-hmm.
just like you said, start with that. But I think you're gonna be fine. You did
Yeah.
amazing on Transformers
Thank you.
one, by the way. I just
Yeah.
recently saw that. That was really fun. Um, Tell me one of your most memorable moments working on that project.
um I don't know, there's a lot. It's kind of like, it was just such a fun fest because we all got along so well,
Oh,
sort of like working with Josh Cooley and Jason Shire, the production designer, and like Lynn Hobson, the editor, and Aaron Dim, our producer. We kind of became this like tight little family,
yeah.
and so it was very fun. And so you know, some of the things were just like goofy things. Like we would go up to San Francisco and kind of use their motion capture stage a little bit
Yeah.
to kind of shoot out some of the scenes. And you know, we would just like go out for these big nasty sushi dinners and just like goof around and have fun and walk around the city, or just have meals out with the ILM crew. And we did a fun trip to Sydney, visiting their ILM facility there when we were
Nice.
first getting started. And so, you know, just like we went to this like petting zoo with like wallabies and kangaroos and just
Love
making
it.
having like goofy pictures. So it's that sort of like off times that are pretty fun to remember. And so we just like kind of hanging out, you know, and then you know, the work, there, you know, there's challenging moments and all that, but mostly because of just like time. Time is the only enemy.
Yeah.
But we all kind of gelled and came together to kind of hit all those challenges. So, you know, I like to say is like we're just a bunch of grown-ups playing with robots all day. You know, like,
That's a great job.
you know, like how bad can it be, really?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. No, that's amazing. I was actually had an interesting question because I thought about
yeah.
it. The pandemic, right? During the pandemic, and I'm just curious of how did you adapt your work process and what the like the techniques that, you know, that
Mhm.
in your perspective did you develop right during that time that you
Mhm.
still use for now? Because I think the pandemic was so, I think it hit everybody like, what's going on? Like I was in LA and I felt like it was in the world, you know, when it happened, you know, I wasn't
Mhm.
working and I was thinking like what if that happens again? How do you continue to keep the machine, you know, your money coming in, you know?
So I was on the previous movie, which was Tiger's Apprentice, which is another Paramount movie. And
Nice.
that's when it hit. And you know, we'd only been in the office for I don't know, 4 or 5 months. So we did have a little bit of an office culture, which I think helped because you
Okay.
already had a shorthand of people. But you know, there was a day where you know, it was getting bad and we just looked around and the producer was like, she was just sort of like, we should just go home. Like this is just ridiculous. Like no one wants to be here. Everyone's nervous and anxious. Like, are we gonna get sick?
Yeah.
And you know, at the time we didn't no one realized how really truly serious it was or not, you know, depending on who you are. But
Mhm.
so I remember the day it was like rain. It's a weird LA. It was raining like hell. And I just drove my car up next to the door and just like literally just took my computer home. Like,
Um,
and we just made a plan, like we're just gonna keep going. And the studio kind of figured out the whole remote thing with all the, you know, because with animation, it's very technical with the computers and the you got to get all the server files and everybody has to share the same files and so there were some logistics to figure out, but you know, and within a couple of weeks, we kind of ironed out some of the ugliness, and so we just kept going. Had these big Zoom meetings every day, and you know, I was tried to you know, just meet with my team as much as possible. I was like always available to Zoom because I wanted to keep that discourse, you
yeah.
know, and at least in Zoom visually you could see each other because
Yeah.
you know, making a movie is, you know, it's a visual medium, right? So if you're just talking or chatting online, so much is going to get lost. So we just kind of almost had my Zoom going from. I remember that I had like one artist in Thailand, and then our vendor was in Paris. So I was zooming from like 6 in the morning till 7, 8 at night, you know,
Wow. Wow.
and just to kind of keep things going.
Yeah.
So you know, it was a little challenging at the beginning, but we kind of found our groove. And then when Transformers started, it was sort of at the tail end.
Okay.
And you know, Aaron Dim, our producer, really wanted us to go back. You know, he just wanted to get that team in the office culture back. And he was right, because, you know, once you get that, you know, all that sort of dynamic together in the same space, it really helps out. So we Yeah, we just ended up going back on hybrid. So it was like 3 days in the office and 2 days at home. So we kind of kept that, we were, I think, couple months in within starting, they allowed us to come back to the lot. They were like, it's safe enough. And that's when, the live action crews were back.
Yeah.
And so it was like, well, we should go back to, because all the union negotiation, they kind of figured it out. But yeah, it is challenging to kind of keep up all those that sort of relationships and dynamics and communication, when you're sort of cut off from everyone.
Yeah. I was like, oh my God.
So I remember our coordinator, Rachel Sherwell, she would organize these events. Like we would do there was all these online like game shows and that type thing, for the crew to kind of keep it light and keep people kind of connected and just chit chatting, or we'd have happy hour on Fridays,
Nice.
just kind of show up with a beer, a drink, or what have you,
Love it.
and just sort of chat, just sort of maintain like what's going on and all
Yeah.
that. So it's not all just business.
Yeah, like it's a little bit of normalcy as well in it. So it doesn't feel like, yeah, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. I have a fun question, and there's
Sure.
no wrong answer. But the three levels of influence: money, power,
Ooh.
and respect. And if you could choose only one of those things, which one would you choose and why?
Oh, um, that's a good one. I think, I don't know, respect kind of I think if it was earned respect is probably the most important, because it just sort of means you're doing what you need to be doing, and you're good at what you do, and that's kind of um what I strive for, just sort of really kind of attack things and try to make it the best it can be, and to sort of get respect for that, I think is probably the greatest reward, and then power, I don't know, that's a tricky one, right? Because it can kind of sound very hollow and egotistical, right? Or empty.
Mhm.
um you want a certain level of power or influence, right? So that you're empowered to do things. And then money, yeah, money's nice. It can make things easier, but like at the end of the day, that's not what it's about, right? I think if I was going for money, I'd probably, yeah, probably would have done something else, finance or something. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's probably way easier ways to make money than, visual effect. When I started out in visual effects, if you're doing like 100-hour weeks for not a lot of money, that's just not what you want to do. So, yeah, that's probably third in my list.
I love that. No, it's a great answer. Yeah, I love hearing everyone's like, I think, yeah, I love it. Yeah, that's a good answer. I like how you broke it down. So thank you for
Okay.
sharing that.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, it's interesting because with choosing your projects, and I'm just curious to, like, at this point you can choose, your projects, I'm sure. Like Transformers and your other projects that
mhm.
numerous projects that you've done, like what what is the criteria that it needs for you to say yes to it, or like,
Mhm.
yeah, you're like, I think I want to do this, like take on this project.
Yeah, I think kind of sometimes, I mean, sometimes it is a little bit limited because things are ready to go when they're ready to go, and and when you're available. So, I don't, it's not like I have my pick, like Spielberg or something, but because he can kind of create things out of thin air if he wants to.
Right, right.
Um, at least I hope he can. And then so I think probably the people, like working with people that you respect
Yeah.
or interesting in and because I remember like Wrinkle in Time came up with Ava,
Yeah,
and
she's great.
I just had listened to like a Fresh Air with her on NPR.
Oh yeah, she's
And then yeah, she's super interesting. And that came up, and I was working at Proof for Previs at the time, and they were like, "Oh, I think they're looking for somebody for Wrinkle of Time," and I was like, "Oh, I have to do that." Like, I just wanted to work with her because she sounded so interesting. And then I met her, and she was wonderful, and the crew around her was great, and so we had such a good time on that. And it was a hard show, like, and mostly again because of schedule, right? Because
Mhm.
and time is your enemy. But everybody's kind of fighting the good fight, and you could see Oprah there. It's just like 2 a.m. on a green screen stage, just fighting the good fight,
I love it.
and like and so everybody's pitching in. And so like that those are the experiences that I like and want to go for,
Yeah,
you know
I love
so mostly just people. Then of course the project has to have something interesting, but also something challenging.
it. Hmm.
You know, for like Transformers, it was, obviously working with Josh Cooley was super interesting to me, and he is such an interesting person, and has such a handle on story. It's uncanny.
Yeah.
And but also like the challenge of the movie is like, how do you make these robots relatable?
Hmm.
Because even in the live action movies, as fun as they are, they're not the main characters.
Right.
You have humans to kind of sink into. And this one, the challenge was there's no humans at all. So like we have to make interesting characters of these guys and these robots. And then also like on the technology side, like using like motion capture as a way to kind of set the cinematography um, was a fun challenge for me because I had used it very in limited circumstances before, but this was like kind of a lot more robust.
Yeah.
And that was fun. It was super fun and
Yeah.
interesting.
I love that. I love that. I was, and I mean, fantastic work, because it
Thank
was,
you.
I mean, just, yeah, it is. How do you make a robot relatable? And you guys did that, it's like kind of interesting. So, I mean, and, with everything like how AI is, here, and everybody had, everybody, there's, I don't know, everybody has
Yeah.
a kind of difference. Like they love it. Some actors hate it because it's like they feel like they're going to be out of work, which, there's a funny episode, well, kind of scary but funny to me, Black Mirrors, I think the season 6, the first episode, where it's like it kind of shows how they can take your likeness, like you can
Mm,
often it you don't really have to be on set anymore. It's like they have your face,
yeah.
they can put you on a moon, so essentially, actors are not needed anymore, which kind of was a little scary to think about, but like,
Yeah, that makes me nervous. I know it's the freight train coming,
yeah,
and no one's going to stop it.
yeah,
So you have to kind of figure out ways, basically to get on the train, right? Because if and so yeah, we obviously we didn't use any AI in the Transformers, but like the tools are just around, right? And I've
yeah.
been kind of messing around with like Mid Journey, the image creative, uh, that sort of image creation app, and then or website rather, and then just seeing the video now. Yeah, it's just trying to figure out ways that it can be in the hands of artists and curators rather than not, people
Yeah.
that are just doing it for economic reasons, because that's always where it gets slippery and bad. And yeah, like, do you need an actor anymore? um
I
I
mean,
mean,
that's what we go to
yeah,
cinema for, because we as humans we can relate to another, like, it's like, oh,
yeah,
that's what I think, that's what creates classics, like
yeah,
you about Sound of Music, or Back to the Future, Jurassic Park. Like, these are films that, you would have to go to cinema, and you feel something, like it's the heart. I don't know, like a lot of films
yeah,
have that anymore. And I think with the AI, and if it does take out, if there's no actors, then it's like, yeah, it'll look like the person, but it,
That yeah,
I don't
yeah, I
know.
know it's an interesting thing. Like because it can only do what it's seen before. So I'm sort of interested, like how can it create, you know, I don't know. It's an interesting question. Like it creates the new by combining the old. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
It's I
yeah.
don't know. It's almost like a hip hop DJ in some way, right? Where you create something new out of parts of something else. You know,
Right.
sometimes in a way. I don't know if I'm. That's probably a terrible metaphor, but um, um, and so I'm curious, but also very nervous about that because, you know, like on Transformers, you know, you got Chris Hemsworth and Brian Tyree Henry who
Amazing.
did an amazing performance.
Yeah,
Um, and they brought the soul, right?
yeah,
And again, try to go back to like how do you make these characters relatable? Well, it's them, right? And then of course the animators have to kind of bring life visually. And so, but if you have those voices to go off of, you know, there's something there to react to, and they bring a certain sense of self, right?
yeah,
You can hear the tone of their voice and timbre and all that stuff, and kind of create a personality out of that. So even though it's not 100% what Brian Tyree Henry moves like, but it's what that voice, his evocative voice sort of creates, you know.
yeah,
And so you have something. So if you're using just AI, you could probably get something that sounds exactly like Brian Tyree Henry, but the nuances of the voice, and you know, and Scarlett Johansson was great too because she would
yeah.
give these line readings, and her voice would crack at certain moments.
Mm,
And it just sort of, I don't know, it creates like, you know, they just become immediately relatable and human, right? It's
yeah,
those kind of um imperfect moments, right? But they're wonderful. And
yeah,
so yeah, I don't know if how how you could orchestrate that with like AI, and then it might become a little contrived. And
right.
yeah,
That's
I don't
interesting
know.
though. I'm curious too. I feel the same. I'm curious to see how that would like be conveyed or like come
Mhm.
across like with audiences or people, but like I don't know. I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out. I mean, it's like there's no way you could do it with a living artist, you know, without their permission.
Yeah.
I hope. And then, but you know, I don't know. Yeah, if you want like a Humphrey Bogart movie again, like they could probably be close to doing something. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know, because even in those like Star Wars films where they did kind of Peter Cushing, um,
Yeah.
um, there were some shots that were amazing, but like other shots were just like no, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, and that was years ago. So I don't know, but I think it's coming at a certain point. And then
Yeah.
if yeah, I don't know, maybe you become this actor that you're the base of Humphrey Bogart or Errol Flynn, or you know, I don't know, you know,
We'll see.
I don't know. So it might change the industry in that weird way where, you know, I don't know.
Well, I'm definitely here for it. I'm curious of what that looks like for sure.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, yeah.
What advice would you give to an up and coming or people that just want to get into what like to the industry and try to do what you're doing? What advice would you give them?
Um, yeah, I kind of love this question. The way I've answered it before is I think first and foremost, like watch everything. Like just open yourself up. Because I remember being younger and you kind of like lock yourself off to like a genre, like, oh, I'm a sci-fi guy, or I'm a person that likes romantic films or what have you. And you just sort of like kind of close yourself off to the other stuff. but I, just try and watch everything, because you never know where inspiration will come from. Yeah, because one of the things that inspired me on Transformers was the 2005 Pride and Prejudice film,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
the Joe Wright one, and some of the cinematography in that is just gorgeous, and the way the cameras moved, and because what I was trying to do with the cameras in Transformers is kind of convey, there's a bit of a caste system in the movie where there's like the miners. When we first start out, our heroes are just these like lowly miner bots, and they can't even transform. They're kind of on the lowest rung of society. And then of course you have the primes, who are kind of the high mighty people. So what I was trying to do is two different kind of camera languages. So when we were shooting the miners, I kind of added a subtle element of like handheld. The compositions were not quite, refined. They were a little bit off. And then we kind of shot them more in their eye line, like level, or even shooting down on them.
Yeah.
And then the lensing wasn't like, when we did the comps and stuff, we kind of emulated lenses that weren't quite, they were like more vintage. And so like the depth of field was a little bit deeper, and there's a slight little bit of like chromatic aberrations and such. And then when we went to the primes, we were shooting them, more like kind of refined and like on cranes or dollies, and symmetrical, like smoother, more controlled. And then the lensing and everything was a little bit more refined. And so when I was watching that Pride and Prejudice film, I was like, oh my God, he's doing the same thing I want to do. Is that when you're with Elizabeth Bennet and her family, it was more sort of like handheld and edgy and all that. And then when you go to Mr. Darcy's world, it's like very kind of
Yeah.
refined and smooth. And so I showed Josh this, and he was like, this is awesome. So, like getting inspired, I was like, oh, this must be where I picked it up from. And it's just like having a kind of a soft spot for this movie. And so, Jane Austen and Transformers, they're like the same, right? So, and that's kind of what I mean is like, you never know where your inspiration is going to come from. And so just sort of open yourself up for that.
I love that. I love that. Oh my gosh, I can talk to you all day. The time, like, it's so crazy how fast 30 minutes go by.
Oh
But
yeah.
oh my
Okay.
gosh, you have
Yeah,
to
yeah,
come back
yeah.
again.
Okay.
This was so great.
Sure.
Um,
Well, thank you.
yes. Where can people find you really quick on social media?
I'm on Instagram, in, I don't know, I think, yeah, I still have a Facebook page, like an old guy.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, just sort of Instagram is kind of where I live right now.
I love it. Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening. And always remember to live, love, laugh. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you
Thank you so much.
again. Have a great one.
Okay, bye.
Bye.